gentlemen. We're going to do our very best, or I'm going to do my very best. There's no we, it's just me. So I'm going to do my very best to try to provide you something that should be interesting, hopefully. All right, YouTube has started, so I'm going to go to YouTube really quick. All right, hang on, see a notification. Nothing in regards to me, so that's good. Do a search for Theology Central. Maybe this will work. There we are. How do we sound? Okay, I don't know because I have Bluetooth on. Go turn off Bluetooth. Okay, there we go. Now how do we sound? Nothing in regards to me, so that's good. All right, we sound okay. Turn off live chat. There we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to see if we can get something accomplished, or I'm going to see if I can get something accomplished. I'm going to toss this iPad now across the room. All right, hopefully, yeah, probably not the smartest idea. All right, we'll get started here in just a second. Oh, I know what I need to do. I need to go over here to Sermon Audio to Webcast. There are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 churches currently broadcasting, so please make good use of those. Sugarland Bible Church, they're always doing Sugarland Bible Church. I see them a lot, and they do a lot of like conferences and special meetings, and yeah, sometimes I want to keep up better with what they're doing. I don't always do that. But yeah, that one is currently underway. So I'm assuming it's a Saturday. They're doing something here. Okay, hang on. I'm going to go listen to us really quick. I want to keep up better with... Okay, I just turned the volume down. I don't always do that. All right, that's done. Currently, I don't know why I cannot get that to work correctly. All right, there we go. All right, I think I know what I'm doing. Oh boy, I hope I can make this work. All right. Okay, we will see. I'm somewhat delusional. Haven't slept in like 50 years. I don't know my name. I don't know what day of the week it is. I don't know what year it is. I don't know where I live. I do know this. Now, for the most part, it's been in the 70s and the 80s around here, but today is one of those days. Oh, I hate when this happens. We have this cold front moved in. It's 38 degrees outside. Now that doesn't sound bad for most of you, but you have to understand the craziness when it's like 80 degrees and then the next day is 38. Now, yeah, I think by tomorrow we're back in the 70s, but it makes 38 feel like, 38 below zero just because it goes from warm to cold, and that massive change. That's the only part I hate. I don't want to be in a place that stays cold, but the drastic change here in Texas when a cold front does make its way down, I think in Florida today, there's some places that may get some snow. So it's one of those weird situations where a massive amount of cold air has moved down south, and I'm hoping it moves its way back north where it belongs, because it's no fun. It's no fun. So it's cold, and yeah. All right, well, let's do this. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further delay, I'm going to do this. Hopefully this will go well, and hopefully this will be beneficial. And I want to thank a listener who emailed this to me. I don't think they emailed it to me for me necessarily to review, but well, I'll explain everything in just a minute. Ladies and gentlemen, without any further delay, we go live in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1.
Looking at our world from a theological perspective, this is the Theology Central Podcast, making theology central.
Good morning, everyone. It is Saturday, January the 17th, 2026. It is currently 11:14 a.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you live from the Theology Central studio located right here in Abilene, Texas. Now, most Christians probably don't talk about it, don't really want to talk about it, and it may not even really impact them, and they don't even really think about it until it happens to them. I mean, that's true about a lot of things in our life, right? There's a lot of things that happen around us that we may not talk about, we may not think about, but we do when all of a sudden those things impact us. Then we give it a lot of thought and a lot of consideration. But I think most Christians don't talk about it. But like it or not, churches die all the time. Well, we don't necessarily like to talk about our own death. And we don't, as Christians, many cases like to talk about the fact that churches die all the time. Now, whenever they die, that don't make the headlines. We don't get an obituary right in the newspaper. I mean, who even reads a newspaper anymore? But I mean, you don't see like, this church died and today this church died and today this church died. You don't see headlines. They don't show up in most cases in any annual report. Hey, today, ladies and gentlemen, or this year, 2025 just ended, and in 2025, this many churches died. Now, they may show up somewhere in a study or an article somewhere, but for the most part, they're out of sight, out of mind. In fact, completely out of sight and out of mind because the church no longer exists. And typically, most churches don't get a proper farewell. They just are there and then they're gone. They just become an empty building on a street corner somewhere that gets turned into something else or gets destroyed and something else is built where that church used to stand. All right? But the truth is, and the truth is somewhat sobering, thousands of churches across the United States close their doors every single year. Long-standing congregations that once felt permanent, once felt anchored, in that community, in that neighborhood, that maybe people will remember how it shaped their lives. Well, they just cease to exist. They're just gone. In recent years, experts have projected that as many as 15,000 churches could close in a single year. A number far larger than the number of new churches being started. So the way it's starting to kind of, I guess we're reaching a tipping point that in many cases, more churches are dying than more churches that are starting. And whatever that means for the future, you can try to unpack that. But the reality is what I'm trying to get across is churches die. And a lot of times there's not good discussions about it, unless you're like, a lot of times if you go to like a church growth seminar, they will show you all the staggering numbers of, hey, these churches are dying. And well, we're here to help change that. That's why you paid $150 to come to this church growth conference so that we can help you change that so that you can go from a church that's dying to a church that's thriving or something along those lines. You know how they market those kinds of things. But to kind of put this into perspective, that's hundreds of congregations, hundreds slipping into silence every single month. Every single month, congregations, churches just slip into silence. They just slip into the unknown. They just slip into non-existence is what happens. And it happens over and over and over again. Now, according to at least some things I was able to find, according to some estimates, the closure trend might only be accelerating, according to some sources, with tens of thousands of congregations at risk of disappearing entirely in the coming years. So some believe that this church closure thing could be accelerating. It could get worse. Now, sometimes you will see other articles that say, no, that's a little exaggerated. It's not that bad. So there's always debate, and sometimes that makes it difficult. So what's the reality? What's the reality? Are churches dying? Are they not dying? I think the reality is churches close every single month, and it doesn't get a lot of headlines, and it doesn't get a lot of attention. And so that kind of makes it like this is happening and nobody's paying any attention. If we paid more attention and there was better tracking, we could get a better estimate of exactly how many churches are dying every month. And I don't know if that would make us either worried, concerned, but it's just a fact. It is happening. Maybe we don't know to the extent, but it cannot be denied that it is occurring. So what I want to do in this episode is talk about, well, what happens when a church dies? And here's a couple of reasons I'm going to be talking about this today, all right? Number one, I got an email early this morning and someone said, hey, look at the featured sermon today on Sermon Audio. And I was like, oh, and it says it's about a church that's struggling, that's located in Texas. In fact, not too far from where I'm sitting. And I'm like, oh, okay, that's interesting. Okay, so I was like, well, do I want to do this? Do I want to talk about this? I'm like, well, they sent it to me. I'm going to listen to it. So if I'm going to listen to it, why not just listen to it with everyone else? Why not just go live instead of just sit here alone in the studio listening to it? Just turn on the microphone, listen to it with everyone else. I love to do that. I'll go in not completely blind because I do know this is about a church that's struggling. From what I can tell, it's like a meeting basically giving the congregation, hey, we only got a few options left here. What are we going to do? And I thought it would be interesting to hear a church in the midst of struggle, what it sounds like, and then talk about it. And a second reason I want to talk about it, as many of you know, well, my church, Victory Baptist Church, located in the middle of nowhere, Texas, is now dead. It died just recently. So it's over. It ended. And we talked about that happening. I really thought it was going to happen in 2024. I guess in many cases it died. I guess technically in 2025, and in 2026, the building was sold and it's completely gone. So it was a long process, slow process of it dying. And so I've been through it. I've seen it happen. I know what it feels like. Now, my situation will be very different than everyone else because in my situation, it died because of me, all right? I'm the reason it died because of my own failure and my own way of thinking that was going to cause me to be in a difficult situation. So what I'm going to do is we listen to this church struggle. I may then bring in some of my own experiences so we can just talk about when a church dies, what it sounds like, what it feels like. I can maybe bring in some of the emotional side of it from my perspective. I can also look at it when a church dies and what I did wrong. And maybe, I don't know, we're just going to have an open, frank discussion about it. I'm just going to be blunt and we'll just see what happens. And some of you have gone through it yourself. You've experienced it. Now, you may not have experienced a church dying. You may have experienced a church splitting, which then may ultimately lead to the demise of at least a church. So between church splits and church dying, it's painful, it's depressing, it's discouraging, and it raises a lot of questions, all right? So here's what I'm gonna do this. Now, I've talked about this in a number of podcast episodes. Some of you will not like me repeating all of this, but I think it lays a very important foundation. If we're gonna talk about churches dying, let's talk about what's required to keep a church operating. Because if a church doesn't meet these criteria, it's going to go away. And so I want us to think about this. Now, I know when I do this, I'll kind of contrast it with what I do. And it's just because I think it serves as a powerful contrast. So let's go through this, all right? I want to try to give you a realistic snapshot of basically what it takes to keep a church open. Right? As you drive down the street and you count 1 church, 2 churches, 3 churches, 4 churches, you count all the churches in your area. I don't know where you live. In my area here in Abilene, Texas, there's like 250 churches. It's crazy how many churches there are. Sometimes I'm like, how do all of these churches stay open? Because when you start looking at basically what's required to keep a church open, a lot of money goes in to keeping those doors open. And you would be shocked in some ways you probably don't even think about how much money. But if you go to church, you should just ask, how much money does it take to keep this church operating every single year? I think it's a question everyone should ask. I know it can be uncomfortable, but when you see the number to keep doors open of a church, I'm sometimes like, wait a minute, what are we actually getting for how much it costs? I know I bring this up all the time. Some people don't like when I do so. They believe it's kind of very fleshly, but it's very practical because whether you like it or not, it's spiritual. I know we like to dress everything up in nice spiritual language and clothe everything in a nice religious garb. But the reality is a church, I know no one's going to like when I say this. It's a business, ladies and gentlemen, and there's no way to say it isn't. You can try to dress it up on all the spiritual language. It's not. Once you have a building that you either are paying a mortgage on, you have to pay this, you got to pay insurance, you got to do this, you got to pay electricity, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do this, then you need money coming in. How do you get money coming in? You need people. How do you get people to come to your church? You got to please them. You got to give them what they want to some level, and you've got to keep them happy. And not only that, you got to keep replacing them because if you don't have the money to keep the doors open. And inevitably, no matter how much you try to dress that up, that's a business. That's a business. And that's uncomfortable for us to talk about, but you have to talk about it, especially when you consider churches dying. So we're going to review the audio of this church because it's a meeting of a church basically struggling. So we're going to review the audio that was sent to me. But before we do that, I'm going to lay a foundation. So are you ready? Here we go. Basically, let's look at the annual operating budget. How much money does a church need? All right. So, or how much money do churches need? Now, let's be honest. Church budgets can vary dramatically. So I've got to just do a lot of get a lot of estimates here, right? But depending on size. Now, depending on size, it's gonna vary, but here's basically the most recent data I can find for congregations in the United States. I cannot speak in other countries. I can only speak about America, right? The median annual budget, the median annual budget for a local church is around $300,000 per year. $300,000 per year. Now, small churches under 200 members operate on budgets somewhere between $100,000 and $200,000 a year. So you need either around $300,000, but if it's smaller, you may get around $100,000 to $200,000 a year. Now, some churches, these are usually the minority churches, because they're much larger, they need somewhere between $500,000 a year to operate. Okay? So the bigger the church, the bigger the budget. So you're somewhere between, at the bare minimum, about $100,000 a year, all the way up to $500,000, and some could even go much larger. The bigger the church, the more programs, the more things you want, the nicer building. Then it costs more and more money. If you want to market your church, you want to promote your church, you want a church to have an app, the more things the people want, the more things it's going to cost, right? The more program. If you want all the Sunday school teachers to have curriculum, that's going to cost. If you want VBS, that's going to cost. If you want, this kind of activity, it's going to cost. It's going to cost. And the budget just goes up and up and up and up and up. And then if you need repairs to the building, you know how it's going to go. So you're talking somewhere between $100,000 to $500,000, right? And that's to try to keep the doors open consistently, paying salaries, utilities, facilities, ministries, insurance, outreach, and basic administrative costs. So a small church often needs in the low six figures annually, while a mid-sized church needs much more. And I did as much research as I could to try to make that as accurate as possible. But please remember this. The lower the budget is, almost inevitably will mean that pastor is probably going to be bivocational. Now, bivocational pastors may not mean anything to the people sitting in the pew, but I can say being bivocational can be the death knell for that person's life. It can be. if you want a pastor who's there Sunday school, Sunday morning, Sunday night, and Wednesday. Now, many bivocational pastors, they will just cut down on services. They'll just cut down on services, right? They won't have a Wednesday. They won't have a Sunday night. And they'll cut down because the pastor's bivocational. And many bivocational pastors just say there's no way they can do it. They're going to be burned out. I've talked to many pastors, and it's just weird. They can't, just trying to do 2 sermons in a week is too much for them. I don't understand. And I get a little frustrated by that because I'm like, look, being bivocational can be absolutely devastating. It can be because it's so overwhelming. But at the same time, if you're going to be a pastor, I don't understand this idea. I just can't put too many sermons together. I don't get it. I don't understand. And I say that not trying to be mean, but as someone who served as bivocational for a very, very long time, and I taught 1 hour for Sunday school, I taught 1 hour for Sunday morning, I taught 1 hour for Sunday night, and I taught 1 hour for Wednesday. I did not cut anything short. I did 1 hour of teaching every single one of those time periods. Sunday school, I taught Sunday school. I taught Sunday morning, I taught Sunday night, I taught Wednesday. Every single time it was about an hour of teaching, almost inevitably, right? Because if you're going to have a church, the church has to produce something of value. And if you're going to cut down the preaching, what's the point of the building? I will say that all the time. If all you're going to do is have Sunday morning, what's the point of the building? If all you're going to do is Sunday morning and maybe Sunday, what's the point? And so many churches, not only do they cut down services, then they do these small groups which meet outside of the church. Well, if you're meeting outside of that building you're paying for, what's the point of paying for the building? I get so frustrated with that. It makes no sense to me. We do small groups. Well, then why are you paying for a building? Just break your church down into small groups and everyone meet in homes and you don't have the cost of the building. It doesn't make any sense to me, but whatever. The point is, if you're going to make the pastor bivocational, inevitably what's ultimately going to happen is the amount of teaching is going to get sacrificed, and most likely you're going to burn that pastor out and probably destroy his family and his life. Okay, not in every single situation. I'm being a little bit hyperbolic there, but it's a lot. It's a lot. If that pastor's taking that preaching and teaching seriously, and he's got to go to another job, that's and yet everyone will expect him to do this and to do that and to do this and to do that and to do this. See, when they show up on the weekend, they have their weekend off. But for the pastor who's bivocational, no, he's going to work. And then he's going to wake up Monday and go to work. And then he's going to go next weekend, he'll be back at work. In fact, you get no time off. You don't have a weekend. You don't have a day off because you're working your normal job and you're working your pastoral job. So the lower the money, the more pressure you place on the pastor, all right? Now, how many people does a church typically have? Well, understanding membership and attendance helps explains why many churches struggle financially. The average church in the United States of America has around 65 weekly worship attendees. That's the average church. They have 65. The median congregation has about 70 regular participants. The average churchgoer, however, often attends a large congregation, around 360 weekly attendees, because a small number of large churches skew the overall average. All right, so the overall average is somewhat skewed because you have these big churches. And so they kind of mess up the average, but there's a lot of small churches that have less than 100. In many cases have less than 70. Many cases have less than 65. You're maybe down to 50. Now, once you get that small, you know what's going to happen. Financial trouble is just around the corner. Or even if you don't have financial trouble, you have financial limits. There's limits on what you can do. In other words, your outreach is going to go to garbage because you can't afford it. You can't afford it. There's very little you can do in that particular case. So there's a whole lot that we could talk about there. Now, how many members do you need? All right. Now, there may not be a single rigid number, but here's the best I could find out with all the research I did. All right. The average giving per person, on average, congregations receive around $800 to $2,200 in giving per attendee annually. So on average, a congregation will receive between $800 and a little over $2,000 annually, depending on size and giving patterns. If a church needs $200,000 per year to operate, at $800 per person per year, you need 250 members. So if you have a $200,000 budget, you need 250 members giving $800 per person per year. Now you just see how, I know this sounds so fleshly, but that's what it turns into. You know how many people you have, and then you know how much money each person has to give if you're going to keep the church operating at this level. And if they don't give that, something has to give. Well, you can't give up electricity. You can't give up paying for the building. You can't give up insurance. You can't give up water, trash pickup. Almost inevitably, you can't give up Sunday school curriculum because most of your Sunday school teachers won't know what to do if they don't have a curriculum. So that costs money. You can't give up certain programs or you'll lose everyone within 5 seconds. So you got to, and I know I hate to see that, but when you stand behind a pulpit and you look out there, you know, I need this many people to bring in this much money or we don't exist. And that is sad because then guess what happens? Your evangelism has more to do with making sure you have people coming to your church to give. You can say, oh, it's about keeping people out of hell. It's about getting people in the church, because if you don't get in the church, your church, in a sense, goes to hell because it's not going to exist anymore. It's going to be annihilated, using our discussion from annihilationism. I hate to say it that way, but it becomes that. How many people do we have? We need more people. Let's do an evangelism push. Invite a friend to church, a witness to someone, tell people about Jesus. Now, I'm not saying that's not sincere, but to pretend that there is not an ulterior motive there, we need more people because we got to maintain. All right. Now, let's see, so at $1,500 per person per year, that's about 133 contributing members. So if you need $200,000 a year, you either need 250 people giving $800 per person per year, or you could have people giving $1,500 per person per year. That would be about 133 contributing members. So what happens? The fewer people, the more money they have to give. The more people, the less money each one has to give. But you don't know how much each person is going to give. And in fact, for me as a pastor, I say, you don't want to know. I don't want to know. I never wanted to know. I don't want to know who gives what, because you know what you're tempted to do. If you know that family is making up 40% of your budget, you're going to have a tendency to say, whatever they're upset about, whatever they want, we're going to do, we're going to keep them happy. And if I know preaching this sermon could tick them off, I'm going to be very careful maybe not to preach that sermon until they're out of town. That inevitably, all this stuff starts coming into play. And just note, if your church budget needs $200,000 to operate, you need that much money coming in and you need that many people, not to grow the ministry. You're just trying to maintain the status quo and pay the bills. So to grow a church's budget, a congregation typically needs more consistent givers, right? So you need that, more weekly attenders, and you need new members each year. In many contexts, church has to have 3 to 5% annual growth just to maintain members because people are going to leave. You got to then you can't worry about the people there. You got to try to worry about how many more people you can it's going to come in, because you know the people there are going to ultimately leave, because people leave churches all the time. Because you don't keep them happy. You say the wrong thing. They get tired of your personality. So that's crazy. That's just crazy. Now, and then think about this, all right? Think about all the money that is spent What are people actually getting for that amount of money? Typical small to mid-sized church, their annual budget, again, between $150,000 to $300,000 a year. We've talked about this before. The typical number of Sunday sermons per year, 48 to 52. Now, again, how that's going to work, maybe you'll get some extra lessons in. Maybe sometimes you'll get a Sunday school class taught by the pastor. Sometimes they're not going to have Sunday evening services. Services are going to be canceled. So let's just say 50 sermons per year, all right? Just to make it that way. So then guess what happens? If the church budget is $200,000 per year, which is very typical for small churches, you get basically 50 sermons per year. That means you're paying $4,000 per sermon. If the budget is $300,000 per year, then you're paying about $6,000 per sermon. Now, I know that money goes to all kinds of other things, but I'm just saying a lot of that other things is simply to keep the building open so that you have a place to go so someone can stand behind a pulpit and preach a sermon. And when you break it down, you're paying $6,000 per sermon? That's insane to me. And then what do you typically get in those sermons? Well, pastors are always like, well, we can't go too in depth behind the pulpit. I can't get into that now. It's a little much to talk about this in a sermon. Well, when are you going to get to the in-depth stuff? When are you going to get to this stuff? When? Are you going to have special classes? Are you going to do special? No, you don't. And even if you do, 10 people show up, half of the congregation doesn't even show up to the special classes. So I don't even get all that money. So just to keep a church operating requires large amounts of money. And that means each sermon, the cost for each sermon is just ridiculous. And I know I hate drawing the contrast. I don't hate drawing the contrast. I know some of you hate when I draw the contrast. But in contrast to it, I have to admit this. What someone can do with a microphone and a laptop and an internet connection and a little bit of money to go to a podcast hosting site, they can produce far more content than any church. They can go far more in depth. They have the ability to offend far more people because they don't have to worry about it so much. Because to keep a podcast going, to be able to live stream, I've talked about it before, just for me to be on sermon audio and to live stream as many hours a day that I want. There's no limits on how many hours I can go live. There's no limits on how many things I can upload. That's $60 a month. So for $60 a month, I can broadcast basically 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It goes around the world and it's uploaded with an entire library ready for you to download whenever you want. Everything's broken down into series. It's organized. It's easily searchable. It's all ready to go for $60 a month. Now you figure that out. That's just right. Now for our podcast hosting site, I've talked about it before, about $120, about $130 a month, and you have some domain names, just say $140 a month, about $100, $140 a month to keep everything operating. And that means there is no limit to how much stuff I can produce. I can go live. We can talk about anything. We can talk about everything. We can do theological discussions. We can do sermon reviews. We can talk about what's going on in the world. We can do Bible studies. We can do everything. For the amount of money, it's crazy. What a church costs to stay open for 1 year. A small church, $100,000 a year? You know what a podcaster could do for $100,000 a year? You know what a podcaster could do for $200,000 a year? It could run circles around what a church can produce. All day long. There's no way a church can even compete with what a podcaster can do. You can just broadcast and broadcast and broadcast and broadcast and broadcast. And people say, well, the church, I'm sorry, it's a business. There's no way to get around it. Right now, I could go on and on and on with all the statistics. Some are going to say I shouldn't have spent all the time going into these statistics, but it lays the foundation. Because what we're about to do is listen to a church that's struggling. And let's listen to this and we'll just try to take it apart. We'll go through it as fast as possible. I know I've been through all of those numbers and statistics, but you need, if you're going to hear about a church dying, you got to remember these numbers. And then you know why it's dying. Why is it dying? They don't have the money to stay open. Why? Because it's a business. And it would be interesting to know how much money they're already bringing in, because I guarantee you, no. If you guys can't stay open for that, give me the money. I will stay open 24/7 for that amount of money, right? It's just, it's so crazy. But let's listen to this. This is from a church somewhere in Texas. I think it's around the Fort Hood area. And, someone sent this to me. It's the featured sermon on Sermon Audio. It's 47 minutes. According to what I can tell, there's a Q&A in it, and the Q&A we don't need. I did have AI look at it and say, hey, am I understanding this right? And it's like, yeah, this is about a church struggling. And yeah, the last part is very procedural, just gets into questions that not very valuable. It's the first part that could be of great value. So we're going to listen to it. I will interrupt as much as I want, and I'll talk about their situation as I hear it, and I'll talk about maybe how it relates to what I've experienced. Here we go.
Robbie Mills to come up. He is the chairman of Mission to North America for the Presbytery, the PCA here, and he's going to take things over.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good to be with y'all today. Merry Christmas. Understand there is food in the oven, and there's a party later tonight, so it's exciting. It's a full day, and it was wonderful to worship with y'all. I guess that was back, Richie, in October. You were doing a marriage conference. I had the privilege of coming down and preaching and worshiping with you guys, and had a great surprise in meeting a couple that I had known from another season of life. So I feel like I've gotten to know y'all more in the last semester, in the last season, than the previous 10 years that I've lived in Texas. But again, my name is Robbie Mills. I live in Dallas. I came to Texas to be a church planter, and we worked with refugees and immigrants in the Dallas area, and have loved being in Texas, in this presbytery, and really I love being with church plants. And a lot of church plants like y'all have incredible stories, incredible legacies. And we're going to talk about just kind of where things stand in this season. There is some transition. And one of the virtues of being a Presbyterian church, a connected church, means that when one suffers, all suffer. When one celebrate, all celebrate. But you all, and you may know this intimately well, or this may be the first time you're kind of seeing some of the inner mechanisms of Presbyterianism, but this congregation is connected to 40 other churches across North Texas. It's called the North Texas Presbytery, from Shreveport, Louisiana in the east, all the way to Midland, out west, all the way up to the Red River in the north. And you are the southernmost church in our bounds, in our region.
Now, I am not an expert on the way the presbytery works. I'm not an expert on how denominational things work. I am always baffled. If this church is connected to 40 other churches, then why is this church struggling? Shouldn't the other churches be able to help it? Shouldn't the other churches be able to maintain it? Shouldn't the other churches be able to come along and keep it going? Now, I know what typically happens is like, well, we will stand with you and help you for so long. But then the expectation is for you to be able to stand on your own at some point. And if you can't, then you're no longer considered a valuable work. And then we pull the plug, we pull the support, and then you collapse, which I've never understood. Like, hey, we will support you, but sooner or later you got to stand on your own. If you don't stand on your own, well, then you're not worth keeping. Well, wait a minute. So God's work is dependent on a certain financial amount of money you have to bring in or you're not sustainable. If you've got 40 churches and you got some that are very successful, then why not help these other churches that aren't as successful to maintain? Because success, that's success from a dollar figure. That's success from a numerical figure. Isn't the success of a church dependent on the faithfulness to the Word of God, not the amount of people there? Now, we love to say that theoretically, but that's not the way people think. If a church is not growing, inevitably, as soon as someone doesn't like that church, say, well, God is not moving. God is not doing anything there. I love when Christians do that. It's such trash. And when I say I love that they do that, I'm being very sarcastic. It's trash. God is not moving there. So God's movement is dependent on how many people show up, how many converts you have. You may want to talk to some of the prophets in the Old Testament. You may want to talk to how successful, Noah's preaching was. Isn't it? It doesn't matter if there's 50, it doesn't matter if there's 10. And the issue is that the Word of God is being dealt with, being struggled with. You're wrestling with the text. You're digging into theology, doctrine, church history. You're working, you're struggling. Isn't that what matters? But no. It matters as a business. You're not doing enough, so you're going to get the plug pulled. Now, I'm not saying they're pulling the plug, right? I'm not saying they are, but I'm just saying if they're connected to 40 different churches, you think they should be very, 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 very safe and very, very stable and should be able to work something out. I'm not saying I don't know how this all works, but it always just drives me crazy. If you're connected, but it almost always comes with expectations, I should say. I'm not saying that that's the case in this situation, but if they're having a discussion about them struggling, I don't know. Let's see what they say.
So I wanted to just let you know a little bit about the transition. Chaplain Richie, Brother Richie, has served you all so faithfully over these last few months, but he will be taking the new assignment in Fort Bragg, North Carolina.
Fort Jackson, South Carolina.
I'm sorry, Fort Jackson. I had that wrong. That's the North Carolinian in me, vying to get you. That is coming up in January, and I want to just bring you up to speed about the search for a pastor. And I also have with me today Bill Thomas, who is a ruling elder from Park Cities Pres in Dallas.
Oh boy. All right, what I'm hearing is they're not going to have a pastor. Now, I have strong feelings about this, all right? And I know my perspective on this it's never going to change anything. It's going to be just me standing in the backyard screaming to the sky. Nobody cares what I think here. I just think it's utterly 1,000% wrong for congregations to be left without a pastor unless a pastor dies, okay? Unless a pastor dies. I do not understand how it works in denominational structures. I do not understand how it works in independent structures. But here's what I see over and over and over. Peace out. I'm gone. And then the congregation is like, we've got to find a pastor. Why would a pastor leave until another pastor has been found and in place? And he helps the church find that pastor, talk to that pastor, give the pastor a walkthrough how the congregation works. Here's how it typically works on a Sunday morning. Here it works on a Sunday night. Here's about the people are going to show up on a Wednesday night. These people are not going to show up. And just like you do in another job, right? Hey, you're getting ready to transition out. Here's going to be the replacement. Make sure they're trained up and ready to go before you move on. And we'll do that in secular jobs, but in the church, it's like, okay, God's telling me it's time to move, because we almost always blame God on it. Oh my goodness, don't get me started on how irritated I get with this nonsense. Okay, oh, God's telling me it's time to move, peace out. And then that church is left with, we don't have a pastor. What do we do? What do we do? What do we do? Why wouldn't that pastor stay until the next pastor is found? Then he can move on. Why does it not work that way in the church? So many times I've watched churches fall apart because the pastor packs up and leaves. I've seen it so many times. It almost all inevitably leads to church splits, and it leads to things falling apart. If the church needs pastors, then you can't leave a church without a pastor. Don't leave until you found them a replacement. If you know you're going to leave, tell them you're going to leave. And they say, but I'm going to stay right here until we find you a replacement. I don't understand that. I don't get the way it works. I understand the logistics of that is not always perfect, but man, they just pack up and gone. And then the church is just left there to die. And it makes, and I get so tired of the God is telling me it's time to move. Look, my church does not believe, my former church, I 1000% rejected any idea that God is speaking to us outside of Scripture. He speaks to us in Scripture alone. He's not talking to you. If you're going to think God is talking to you, it's because you're reading Scripture. That's it, okay? And yet, we paid for someone to go for a summer to be a missionary in Africa. It cost a considerable amount of money. We did not make them go do car washes and sell candy bars and do it. No. The church covered every cent of it. Every cent. And it was expensive to cover them for being gone for basically 3 months to go off to be to do mission work in Africa. We covered everything. They come back. They stand up to tell us about their experience for those 3 months. And then announce at the end of their talk that God is telling them it's time to move on and they're leaving the church. We spent all of that money for them to come back and say, peace out, God. And of course, God is telling them, oh, give me I was in utter shock. I'm like, oh, wow, we just spent all of that money. Now, I know what you're thinking. Well, what really matters is not that they left. What really matters is the missionary work that they did. And you're right, but it's still a big investment, especially in a small church in the middle of nowhere, Texas. And so those kinds of things can happen. We had another missionary that we were supporting, and then come to find out that person had left the mission field, and we were still giving them, I don't know how much money per month. And then, it was that whole mission agency, the whole thing was messed up. We were not happy with that. So we had some bad experiences in trying to support people. So it's just, I just don't get it. Hey, we're going to have to find someone. Well, I don't understand why anybody would leave until you have found someone. I don't get that. I don't understand that. Makes no sense to me.
And Heath Robinson, who is a ruling elder down the road at Redeemer Temple, both PCA sister congregations, and you'll have a chance to hear from them in a moment. But before we get too far into this, I do want to honor Hill Country and all the labors and work that's gone into it. Lou and Shirley Best, who started the congregation in the year 2006. And so Hill Country has been a mission church of the North Texas Presbytery for nearly 20 years. And in that time, there have been so many families that have come through. I hope we can accumulate a record of all the saints that have been part of this fellowship of believers. It's a massive thing, and all the more so because of Fort Hood, and it's been such a blessing to so many families. I know that was one of the testimonies that Richie shared of just how impactful and grateful the Brasher family was to find a Reformed congregation here in Killeen. And we really want to honor Lou and Shirley. One of Lou's assistant pastors, a good friend of mine, Agner Montes, Pastor Joel Spence, who followed Pastor Lou, and of course Richie's predecessor, Peter Deach, who word on the street is he was in town yesterday drilling, and of course Richie Brasher. But a 20-year mission is a rare thing to find, and I been in probably 100 plus PCA churches across the country, many of our MTW missions overseas. And I just want you to know this, you are part of an amazing fellowship. We praise God for you and are thankful for you. Basically, we found out at the end of August that Peter was going to be taking a new call up in Kansas City, and we had a great providence and blessing in place with Richie, who was ordained in the Orthodox Presbyterian Church, and had to do a little bit of work to make sure all of our presbytery was on board and we could get Richie ready to lead y'all. But he's done an amazing job these last few months. And we in the presbytery have been searching for a longer-term plan, a longer-term pastor. And we had a couple different candidates, guys that we did some initial interviews with. One man in Pennsylvania, didn't really feel like we could bring him to you guys, to our committee, to pursue that further. Another possibility was a younger man who actually just became a chaplain as well in Connecticut, but ended up family wanting to remain there in Connecticut. We've looked around our presbytery, some other ministers, and even had some conversations with guys who were already part of us, much like Peter was able to just come from Midland here many years ago. But the headline is that we don't have the next pastor. We are seeking that still. And with Richie's transfer coming up.
See, even with the denominational structure, you're still left with, sorry guys, we don't have anybody for you. You're out of luck. You don't have a pastor. What? I just don't get it. Hey, we're going to have a church. You've been here for 20 years. We are really grateful for you, but we can't find you a pastor. You're out of luck. You're just out of luck. We don't know. I don't get how that even happens. I don't understand. I just don't get it. Unless the other pastor dies, why leave them if they've been there for 20 years? Like, I don't understand it. Like, I don't get the way it works. And it sounds like maybe some were chaplains. If they're chaplains, then if there were chaplains, but yet serving there, then if the church is located in Killeen, which is Fort Hood, then they're chaplains. I'm assuming these were chaplains assigned to Fort Hood. And then maybe they were in the military and then they serve here at this church as long as they are a chaplain on base or on that'd be Army post. I'm thinking Air Force language. So on Fort Hood, and then maybe they get moved, and so therefore, because it sounds like one is going to Fort Bragg or one of the other forts, South Carolina, I think, maybe Fort Jackson, whichever one they're going to. So maybe that's what they were doing. So they had a pastor, but the pastor was really a chaplain in the military, and then when they got moved, then that left the congregation without anybody. Maybe that's the way it's working. I don't understand the exact structure. So in that case, you can't blame the person for leaving. I mean, the military says it's time to go. You got to go. I mean, there's nothing you can do about that. So just kind of a weird system. We're going to use, our pastors are going to be chaplains in the military, and chaplains usually don't stick around that long anyway. And it sounded like if they were going through a lot of names, they'd already gone through a number of people in 20 years. They didn't have anyone stick around. It sounds like that. So I don't understand their structure. It's kind of odd the way it seems designed.
In mid-January, obviously it's a poignant time because we need a pastor. We need a pastor. We love to see this mission continue, but the Lord needs to bring a man, and we currently don't have that. Now that the Lord could provide that, things would have to move pretty quickly if that were to be the case, but that still is a possibility. But we were thinking back in August that with Richie coming in, essentially he could help bridge Hill Country Church from Peter to whomever the next person is. And what I want you to hear me saying clearly is that we don't have the next part of that bridge. Richie's been a really strong bridge, but we don't have the endpoint of what that bridge connects to. And so really the reason we're here today is we just want to bring you this information and share it with you and ask you to pray with us. We don't have a prescription for what's next, but we'd like to share a few ideas about different directions we could go from here. We can build another bridge. We have ample pastors in the area. I'm happy to come in. We've got a sort of a bench of guys who would be willing to come and help do pulpit supply, much like I did and others. But really the key element we need to figure out is who can be the next pastor. I know that y'all have been faithfully praying for that each week. But just the three kind of directions that we could see things going from.
All right, so he's going to give them three possible directions they could see things go. But the bottom line is this church is possibly in trouble because they just can't find a pastor. I don't get it. I just do not understand that. Unless their system is if they've been using chaplains on the military installation, then I understand why, because they're only going to be there for a short period of time and they're going to be gone. That's an interesting approach to do things. And that's okay if that's the way it works, but then you're ultimately now left in this. And so the church could die after 20 years just because you can't find anyone? You can't find a pastor anywhere? Now, I know that this has to go through their denominational process, and they have to find the presbytery that then they agree. So there's other people that thought about coming here, but he's not good enough for them. I don't know. So I don't see the denominational structure is interesting to me. It's interesting to me. It's like I understand you got to, I don't know. All right, but let's see what their three options are.
Here. The first option would be after Rishi transfers, this group could continue to huddle together, to come together, and in our polity, we couldn't have a full-on worship service, but you could continue to have a prayer service, fellowship time, Bible study. That is something that's doable, and we've had other folks waiting for pastors do that and huddle together for a season.
Okay, so what you can do is you can keep meeting due to their theological structure. You can't have a worship service, but you can huddle together. He calls it a huddle. You can huddle together. You can pray. You can do Bible study, but you can't really worship because, according to I'm assuming due to a sacramental understanding. If it's a sacramental understanding, then you can't do worship unless you have someone duly ordained to then administer the sacraments. So I'm assuming that's what they're going with it from a sacramental standpoint. If you don't have a sacramental system, if you have people huddling together, praying and studying, is that not worship? Okay. I don't. We can. That's a whole different discussion. So hey, so you can huddle together. We don't have anyone who can be your pastor, but you can huddle together and do this for a season. It sounds like that there would be a limited amount of time that they would be allowed to do that within this denominational structure. Of course, everyone could just leave the church and do that on their own, but okay. But if they want to stay within that denominational structure and that theological system, okay, so they can huddle together and just try to make it on their own, I guess. I guess they can make it on their own. Let's see what the other options are.
What I want you to know about that is that we'd have to just hold that a little bit open-handed because we don't know how long that would potentially be, and God bringing a man to be the pastor. So that's sort of that first option. If you think we don't have the full-on worship, but we could still huddle together. And
I mean, that sounds, hey, you could huddle together, but we don't know when. They don't seem to even have even a prospect of someone who's going to be a pastor. What I don't get it. You don't have anybody? You got 40 congregations, and nobody in those 40 congregations, I don't know what you call it in the presbytery, but you have no one, what we would call, and especially in the independent fundamental Baptist world, you have no preacher boys? You have no men who want to be in ministry? You have no one? And I know maybe to be they would have to go through all of their requirements to be able to get there, but man, 40 congregations, you think someone there is at least ready or close enough to ordination. I mean, what do they have to do to get ordained? What do they need to do? Is it one of those things you're not going to get ordained unless you go to one of their approved seminaries and get, $75,000 in debt? Okay, so yeah, don't even get me started on the whole seminary industrial complex. That's such a scam. It's not even funny. Okay, don't even get me started on that. Man, we have no idea. We don't even have a prospect. So you could just meet. You can't worship. So that entire time you can't worship according to our theology. You could just get together and pray. And he's really not sounding like he's too on board with that one too much. It doesn't sound like that he's a very, at least from my hearing, it doesn't sound like he's promoting that one too much. Let's see what the second option is.
And come together and do study, fellowship, encourage each other in prayer. The second sort of route to go would be, you kind of think about being on a hiatus, and that one, it's not a great word for that, but there's nothing that dictates Richie transfers and then we just have to end things. That's not necessarily, the next step. So there could be a time of suspension where Hill Country is on hiatus, in which time we would want you guys to find a place to worship for a season. We want you to be able to have a good home church, a place where.
No, wait a minute. So you're going to go on hiatus and you're going to let all these people go find another church. If they're going to go find another church, I'm assuming they're going to find another Presbyterian church. And if they're going to find another Presbyterian church, then why does your church exist if there's other churches that they can just go to? Especially if you are holding to presbytery. Everything you're doing here is, you're saying you can't even meet together and worship because it doesn't fit our theological understanding. Then I'm assuming these people would have to go find a church that meets that theological system. And if there's one that meets that theological system, then what's the point of your existence? I would assume you're there because you're thinking that you're a mission church because there needs to be a mission there because there's no one else doing what you think needs to be done. If they can just go find another one. I know when Victory Baptist Church came to an end, I will say this, and I don't mean this in a proud way, but I will say that nobody who left my church and went and found another church found anything close to what we did. No way, no how. They may find things that are similar theologically, but not the way we did things. Not the theological, we challenged everything, questioned everything, did hermeneutics in real time. Nobody found a church that does anything like what we did. I guarantee you. Nowhere close. In fact, I know where most of the people went to church. I could go review those sermons right now if they're on. I know some of them are online. I could go review them right now and show you that's what my people went to. This is what we did. And it would be like, they'd be like, whoa, they went to that after that. Yeah, it's not the same. So just saying, well, and guess what? If you take a hiatus and they all go find a church, who says they're all going to turn around and come back? They may go find a church and like it better than the new pastor you bring in. That's a horrible idea. I don't see how that works in any way, shape, or form. I know that in my church, when we took a little quote unquote hiatus, right? And that hiatus was still me sitting here in front of a microphone trying to give people things. Everybody still went and found another church. Right? We took a hiatus because we couldn't afford to keep the doors open. We couldn't pay. There was no way we were going to be able to pay everything. So I said, well, I can go I can sit at home and record, and I could go live on Sunday. Well, no, people wanted to go to a church, so most of them went and found a church. Well, once they go find a church, even if I was to say Victory Baptist Church is back, I don't even know if everyone would leave the churches that they have found now and come back to Victory Baptist Church, because people go find things and they ultimately will like, you know what? I like this better. That's nothing against people. People are going to find things they like. So whoever the new guy you bring in, he's going to have to now hopefully be better than the people that they just left. That hiatus, that's a bad. I don't even know how that works. Hey guys, we want you to go find a good church and we want you to be happy. But just remember, once we bring in the new guy, you're supposed to come back here. The new guy's going to show up and nobody's going to come back. He's going to have an empty building. He's going to be starting from scratch. Okay, maybe that's a little bit of hyperbole.
Where you can be fed, where you can hear the preaching of the word, participate in the ordinary means of grace. The sacraments, like our brother just wonderful explanation of the supper today. And
there we go. The ordinary means of grace. Okay, they're sacramental, and sacraments are visible means of grace that impart actual grace. They actually do something. They're not just ordinances. But yeah, so, all right. So I knew they had to be sacramental to say you can meet, but you couldn't worship, because you have to have a properly ordained person to be able to administer the sacraments. I figured they were sacramental. I figured. Okay. So that makes a lot of sense.
Really matters. So that middle second door could be sort of a hiatus option. A third door is we could look at things, and this is going to take conversation among you all with some of the provisional session members. But a third option is look at where things are in January and say, you know what, we've had an amazing 20 years. It might be time to bring things to an end. It might be time for this chapter of the mission of North Texas Presbytery, for the mission of God, to hit pause through us.
Oh, wow. Oh, I've had to say those words. Oh, man, those are painful words. I'll never forget the Sunday where I basically said, hey, guys, I think maybe we're getting to the end. Oh, man, I get emotional even thinking about it. I broke down in tears when I had to say that to everyone. Maybe it's time for us to have to bring this all to an end. Maybe the writing's on the wall. Maybe it's done. Now, in their case, I don't know how many people they have showing up. But if they can't, I can't understand why they can't find them a pastor. That's insane to me. Okay, but they're dying because they can't find a pastor. I don't know how many people they have there. I don't know. Maybe they can't find a pastor because they don't have enough people to pay the pastor. I don't know. Maybe that's why they're using chaplains. Because those men are getting their military pay if they're chaplains. I'm assuming they're in the military. I don't think I've ever, maybe the military, I don't think they use civilian chaplains. I don't think, maybe in a certain situations. I'm just trying to think of everything I've seen. I didn't always pay attention to what was going on at the chapel in any of the military bases I'm on, because the chapels were typically, I don't know what they were theologically, but they were usually a disaster. But that's a whole different story. So, but man, those are painful words. Now, again, I'm going to say, why do churches die? Well, I don't know all the ins and outs, but it's either financial or they just can't find them a pastor. And again, and if they can't find a pastor because of financial situation, then we're right back to all the stuff you need to keep a church going. That's why I spent all of that 30 minutes at the opening of this going through all of those statistics to just show you how this works. And see, when you start looking at all of this, it feels very much, even though he's using all kinds of spiritual language, it's very much like a business. Hey, we can't keep the doors open. We can't keep this going for whatever particular reason. And money typically comes into play. Typically. They haven't mentioned it yet, but I'm saying typically it does. And it's always sad when it comes down to that. And again, I will put in contrast where they're sitting there trying to figure out what to do with a pastor and what we're going to do here and how we're going to meet. And let me make it very clear. While they're doing that, Someone with a microphone and a laptop could give them far better teaching 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. I will say this, though, and this is the weird thing. If they're sacramental and those sacraments are actual means of grace, then I don't even know how he could suggest they go and just huddle together without worship, because they would be cut off from the sacraments. Because during that, they cannot partake in the sacramental system. If they're just huddling there, they're cut off from the sacraments. And if the sacraments do all the things that they claim they do, then the last thing you would want to do is be cut off from the sacraments. When I was a Lutheran, that was a big deal. That was a huge deal. You did not want to miss the Lord's Supper. It imparted grace. It brought about the forgiveness of sins. It was your spiritual food. It imparted grace and strength to you. So I'll never forget when I joined the military, I was Lutheran. And so when I first got to my to basic training, and they took us to the general Protestant chapel service, that thing was a train wreck. I begged, I pleaded, like, get me out of this. I thought I was going to lose my mind. And so I said, please, is there a Lutheran chapel on this base, and how do I get there? And they told me where to go on Sundays. And so I went to the Lutheran chapel and was able to partake of the sacrament, which in my mind, from a theological perspective at the time, that was very meaningful. So their first option, cutting them off from the sacraments, if you believe in the sacraments, makes no sense. The second, going on hiatus, makes no sense. So inevitably, this seems to be they're leading towards this, the end of the church after 20 years. It's crazy how quickly a church can find itself going from great to death. It is so, I guess it's a very similar to physical life. One day you're doing great, the next day you're dead. I mean, it can happen that way as well.
And that's okay. I was actually, as a church planner, I have the dubious distinction as a church planner of both starting and closing our church. We made it a great 7 years, but we felt back in 2022 it was time to bring it to a close. And that may be the sentiment among y'all, and that's a worthy decision. And we would have good options for you as PCA members if you come to that conclusion too. With both the second and third options, one of the things we really wanted to encourage you with, and this is part of our group being here today, is praise the Lord, you're not in Midland. We actually have some really wonderful nearby sister congregations that are thriving, healthy, vibrant places that would be welcoming and eager to receive you.
It makes no sense. You've got thriving sister congregations nearby? Then what's the point of your stinking existence? Sometimes I don't understand. I don't. If you've got other good churches around, then why did this one exist? How many churches do you need? We need 15 in this town. What? I wonder if this church is located, it can't be on the base. Or I keep saying base. I'm sorry. For those in the Army, I apologize. I'm calling Fort Hood a base. I know that's not right military language. I'm sorry. I was in the Air Force, okay? Your post, okay? Your fort, okay? I know it's not located on Fort Hood, so I'm assuming, I wonder if it was a mission church to Fort Hood. And so it's close by to the military installation. I mean, that place, Fort Hood, is a city. That place is gigantic. Okay. But yeah, I don't get it. 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 I don't understand. Hey, if it all falls apart, you're in good hands. We got sister congregations nearby that are willing to receive you, and they're thriving. You guys aren't thriving, okay? You guys can't find a pastor. I don't understand. I don't. That must be something weird about the way the Presbyterians work, but I just don't get it. If you got multiple churches within one town that all believe the exact same thing, why do you have multiple churches within why did you have a mission church if you already got sister congregations nearby? I don't get it. Unless those sister congregations are further out and therefore not central to Fort Hood. And the goal of that church was to reach people at Fort Hood. I can understand that. I don't know. All right. We'll wrap this up.
Knowing about Hill Country's mission. And you'll have a chance to hear from Heath in just a second from Redeemer Temple. But the three nearest congregations to y'all are 30 minutes away, 25 minutes away. You're going fast according to Google Maps. Redeemer Temple, downtown Temple. Waco is about 50 minutes, and Georgetown, south of us, Christ President Georgetown is also nearish. And those are
Okay, well, now I see what's going on. 30 minutes, that's not too bad. 50 minutes? 50 minutes one way to church? I'm assuming you're only going to go Sunday mornings. And many of them probably don't even have Sunday evening services anyway. So, all right. Man, okay, I can kind of see why. 30 minutes is not horrible. 50 minutes, you're pushing it. Okay, I can kind of see why then maybe this one existed. Okay, that makes more sense. The way it says when he said nearby, that's not that nearby. That's not that close. Once you get past 30 minutes, I don't know. You're pushing it for many people. Now, some will go. Some will drive 50 minutes. But I'm telling you, you can sure start seeing how probably infrequent, how your church attendance frequency will probably drop if it's 50 minutes away.
We know men and elders and leaders of all three of those churches. They're great places. Temple is close. Temple is sister church. And I'd love to ask Keith maybe if you would come up and just share a little bit about Temple and introduce yourself and your connection to this congregation.
Yeah.
We don't have a chance to hear from Bill Thomas.
Greetings from your sister church and Temple, Redeemer Presbyterian Church. I'm Keith Robinson. I've been on this session since we were particularized in 2015.
Okay, well, now it's going to get into, hey, this could be your new pastor, I guess. Wow, that is interesting. I'm glad someone sent this to me. It is very interesting. There's a lot of church policy there that I'm not familiar with, the way that all works, and it's kind of interesting. But it just demonstrates the sad part, because even the one speaking, he was a part of a congregation that lasted for 7 years and ended not too long ago. Now this one is possibly dying. My church just died. It just demonstrates the reality of churches die all the time. They die all the time. And it's sad when it happens, but it's a reality. And it leaves a lot. I don't have any major takeaways from this other than this. Whether we like it or not, church is a business. You can say all day it's not. It's a business, and it requires customers, which are the congregation people. You've got to have a product and a service that they want, and that they will support it with their money. Because if they just support it with showing up and not with their money, it's great that they're there, but if they don't support it with their money, it's going to go away. It's going to cease to exist. So you got to get people not only to be happy with what you provide them, you've got to they're so happy with it that they're going to give a certain amount of money in order to pay the bills. And for that church to operate, they need a certain number of people giving a certain amount of money every year. And if they do not, things start going bad. Not only that, congregations obviously need pastors, obviously as well. But in many cases, those pastors need to get paid, or there's going to be problems. Now, the reality is, I hate that part of ministry. I hate it. I hate that buildings cost money. I hate that it costs money for AC units and plumbing and fix this, and you need this repaired, and you need this, and you need this, and you need that. I hate that part of ministry, but it takes money, and a lot of money, to keep a building going. It takes a lot of money if that pastor is going to get paid. It takes a lot of money if you're going to have any ministries. It takes a lot of money if you're going to do anything. I mean, right there, just to show you, that church, they are the featured sermon on Sermon Audio today. That cost them $200 to get in that spot. It is interesting they paid $200 to get in that spot, but it may not. It may make sense because they may have made $200 to just advertise to everyone, hey, we don't have a pastor. Is there anyone out there who's ordained in our denomination that could possibly help? I don't know. Unless Sermon Audio gave them a free feature to be able to be there to let their plight be known. But it costs money. It costs money to broadcast. It costs money to be a podcaster. The thing I've always said is you can do online ministry for so much cheaper than you can to do what they're doing, to try to keep that building operating. They're going to need people to go there. And if they all leave, then that's going to benefit some other congregation, though. If all those people go to Temple, I think is what they're calling it, I think that's the one that's closest. The one they're referring to as their sister congregation. Well, then that congregation will be even thriving more and they'll be benefiting more. The people who left my church when it all collapsed and they've gone somewhere else, those congregations are benefiting. One of them, it sounds like, is pretty large. So they're going to benefit. Those people will show up. They're going to give money. That's going to be more money. So in many cases, that's the way it works. The weak, I hate to say it, but the weak churches collapse, they fall apart, and it always builds up the ones that are doing great. It gives them more money, gives them more people. In some cases, that's the way it works. It's the fitness, it's the, survival of the fittest, I guess in some ways. It's very fleshly in many aspects. There's no way to get around it. You need people, you need money. You don't have people, you don't have money, it goes away. And the same thing is true in either, podcasting. Either the people give or the podcast doesn't exist. The good thing is you don't need that much. You don't need near as much to keep a podcast going. You don't have the building. You don't have all of that. You just need someone to help pay so that you can keep broadcasting. So the contrast is crazy, but man, it is sad to hear that because it does sound like, I can't say for sure, but it sounds like the fact that he's already got someone there from the sister congregation, you can kind of see which direction they're thinking they should go. You can hear it. And the hiatus, who's going to do that? The other one, well, you can meet, but you can't worship. Come on. That you can hear where this is they're being led to their own demise. Hey, here's where we think you should go. Here's the church you should go to. It's only 30 minutes away. Hey, come on up and sell yourself because this place is dead. Right? This place no longer is going to be around. And it is sad how that happens. And I'll end with this. On the north side of Abilene, Texas, I think it was Grape Street. I think it's Grape Street going one way, Grape Street going one way. I can't remember the other one, south or north, or is it Ambler? I don't remember what the cross street, but there was a huge building that sat there, a huge building. It was a Baptist church, University Baptist Church. The building was huge. Whenever I would drive past it as a teenager, I'd be like, wow, that's a big church, right? It was right down the street from Hardin-Simmons University, the Baptist university in our city. Abilene has 3 Christian universities: Hardin-Simmons, Baptist, McMurray, Methodist, ACU, Abilene Christian, Church of Christ. All right, 3 big universities. ACU is gigantic. Is viewed as a pretty good school. Hardin-Simmons is viewed as a pretty good school. McMurray is a much smaller school. All right, but three of them. So University Baptist, obviously, you know why it's there. It's right there to minister to those college kids, right there, right? They're right. They could walk from campus to University Baptist. It's that close, right? It was right there on the corner. You could easily walk there. Huge church. I'll never forget. A lot of times I'll spend like a month just listening to all the churches in the local area. I did it as a pastor. I haven't done it recently. Maybe we'll do some church sermon reviews of sermons in the local area because it's just cool to kind of see what's going on in your city, right? Like if you've never done that, just spend a month listening to sermons in your city. Just what are the churches talking about? Is there, what's going on? Sometimes you'll stumble upon very interesting things. So I'm listening to it. And as soon as it came on, I was like, whoa, this sounds weird, right? And come to find out, they were broadcasting, or they were uploading, basically what you call podcasting. I know some churches, we're not podcasters. If you upload your stuff to the internet, you're a podcaster, okay? But they uploaded their message. And as soon as it came on, I could tell that just from the sound, something was weird. So come to find out, this huge church, the entire building basically was empty. There was like 10 people, 15 people. The pastor was kind of just standing there in front of these like 15 people talking about basically the church coming to an end. And I remember being totally shocked. Like, that building has 15 people? Now, at that time, my church was, we were probably have like 70, 80, almost 100 people in the middle of a little church in middle of nowhere, Texas at Victory Baptist Church. And I'm like, whoa, how are we doing so well and they're doing so poorly? Okay, now, I should have known that my situation wasn't going to last. And I know why my situation didn't, because of the way I do things, right? I wasn't going to stay on a theological team, and I was going to continue to challenge. I was going to ultimately make a million mistakes, okay? And I did. I made a million mistakes beyond just the way I wanted to do church, just my own personal failures, okay? But we could go through all of that. But I was like, that is sad. That is sad. And ultimately, it closed down, and the building is no longer there. It's gone. I drove by it when, 1, 2 o'clock in the morning, not too long ago. And it's just, there's no building. I don't even know what's there anymore. It's gone. No longer exists. That thing was huge. Gone. Now, I can tell you what happened. What happened is a new church came into town called Beltway Park Baptist. And now it's just called the Park. Then it was called Beltway. It was called Beltway Baptist at the time, but it was a huge church, not far from where I'm sitting. I could probably get there in about 5 minutes. It's just down the street. And they have a south side campus and they have a north side campus. Beltway Park or the Park. And it became the big church that started getting all the college kids, right? Started getting all the college kids. They started, and lo and behold, the Park became the hip place to go, and University Baptist became the dying dinosaur, the relic of the past. And it no longer exists. It's gone. And it's sad the way that works. Now, here's what's crazy. University Baptist was Southern Baptist. Beltway Park was Southern Baptist. So the city of Abilene needed another Southern Baptist church so that we could systematically destroy the other Southern Baptist church. I don't even know how many Southern Baptist churches there are in Abilene, but they're all Southern Baptists. So why would you bring in more to destroy the other? That I don't understand churches' mindset sometimes. Well, we don't like the way they had their color of their carpet, so we're going to go to this. I don't get it. I don't get it. So even in this situation, I guess 30 minutes away, you can make some argument for having another one, but I just don't get it. And does that sister congregation not have anybody who's ready to preach? Nobody that can be ordained, that can just, hey, your sister church needs a pastor. You've been here in this congregation. You're ready to be a pastor. Let's ordain you. And then you just go down. You can drive 30 minutes. I mean, it's already built in. I mean, why? I don't understand how you can't sustain it. I don't understand. I just don't get it. But churches die. And I don't know what you take from all of that. I don't know all the lessons other than it takes money. It takes people. And once that happens, inevitably, there's no way to get around it, no matter how much we want to spiritualize it. It's a business. And I hate that part of it. I do. I hate that part about what I'm doing right now. I hate the fact that I don't know, I have to look at the date. It's coming up soon. I'm going to get that $60 bill from Sermon Audio, and then I'm going to get that $20-something bill from Spreaker, and then I'm going to get that $20 bill from Podpage, and I'll get that, I'll get those bills. I hate that. I loathe that. But I know this. it is very difficult not to see how much it costs to keep a church going and what you actually get from a church that's open. It's really hard to see. I don't get it. If you're there for supposedly preaching and teaching, and if preaching and teaching is the king of what the church is supposed to do, I'm sorry, someone with a microphone and a computer can do far more preaching and far more teaching, usually at far greater depth than that can happen in a church. And that is hard for me to wrap my mind around. We're going to pay this much money for a sermon. I don't get it. I don't get it. Yeah, a lot there to consider. But if you're sacramental, it makes perfect sense. You need that building. You need that pastor because you can't get the sacraments without it. If you're not sacramental, it becomes very much more difficult to justify how much money you're paying to have a building where you can hear a sermon when you can hear that sermon without ever going to a building. But people want to go to a building. And I do understand that building mindset. But all right, I'll stop right there. Thank you for listening. Everyone have a great Saturday. And I apologize if this did not go perfectly, but hey, yeah, I did the best I can. All right. Thank you. Everyone have a great day. I pray for these people in Killeen, Texas, or Fort Hood. Yeah, right there. And I visited Killeen because I visited a Lutheran school there because when I was going to become a Lutheran pastor, I wonder if this Lutheran school, they had a school of theology there, and I visited the library, and yeah, that's where I was going to possibly I wanted to go to school there to become a Lutheran pastor. So I've been to Killeen many times. I've been to Fort Hood and for military stuff. So yeah, that's I know where they're at, and I feel bad for them. I feel bad for them because when a church dies, man, that's a sad situation, and it can be very depressing and frustrating and discouraging. So I hope for the best for all of them, and I hope they can find a pastor, but if they can't, I hope they can be happy with their sister congregation, and yeah. All right, thanks for listening. God bless.